On November the 21st this year, the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, announced that a vote to repeal net neutrality legislation would be taken on December the 14th. Net neutrality legislation is fairly recent. It was written into American law in February 2015 with the stated aim of preserving the freedom of the Internet. So it's almost certain to be repealed. The majority of FCC members appointed by the present administration are opposed to it. But it's worried huge numbers of Americans. In this special report, we'll examine the major issues, because they go right to the heart of what it means to have freedom of speech. We're not lobbying for one side or the other. We believe you should be able to make up your mind from the facts and not from the scare stories put out by lobbyists or PR people from either side. Here's one typical response from the vlogger Boogie.
The FCC today announced their plan to finally vote to gut net neutrality as it exists and basically change the internet as it has always been forever, and in my opinion, for the worst.
Thanks, Boogie. But is this really such a big issue?
I'm Congressman Ed Markey. I am the chairman of the Internet and Telecommunications Subcommittee in the United States Congress. We have jurisdiction over something called net neutrality. That is, what are the rules of the road for the net in the years ahead? Should it be controlled by just a small number of very large companies that can put up their own roadblocks, their own toll roads as communications colossi? Or should it remain an open, chaotic, democratic information highway? That's the big issue. And it's no small question, because it really goes to what our country is going to be like in the years ahead, because it is the way that Americans now communicate.
He's right. It is no small question, and it does go to the heart of what America is about. So, what is net neutrality? One of the most concise descriptions of net neutrality we found was given by Senator Ron Wyden. He's already won a reputation for fighting for the freedom of the Internet, and here he is speaking to the US Senate.
This is what net neutrality is all about in a sentence. After you pay your Internet access fee, you get to go where you want, when you want, and how you want. And everybody is treated the same, from the most affluent person in America to those who are walking on an economic tightrope every single day. They all can use the Internet to get access to those fundamental opportunities that are so essential to increasing the quality of life for our people.
Put like that, it's a no-brainer. The fears are genuine, and there are basically two of them. At present, net neutrality ensures that all content is treated equally. ISPs can't boost access to one type of content and limit access to others. And the first fear is that Internet service providers, the companies who provide the Internet feed to your router, want to discriminate against some content providers who can't pay by throttling their speed, effectively shutting out the little guys, and will discriminate in favour of those who can pay more, effectively creating a fast lane, a slow lane, and possibly even a no-go lane. The second fear is that because they'll no longer be classified as public utilities, they'll be free to discriminate not only on the basis of money, but also on the basis of content. They'll be able to throttle the speed of their competitors, block campaigning sites that they don't like, possibly even slow down content from political parties like the Republicans or the Democrats. And yes, it's already happened. In 2007, the ISP Verizon blocked pro-abortion group NARAL from using its services to send campaigning text messages, though Verizon quickly reversed the decision because of the public outcry. In other words, the fear is that no longer will you be able to go where you want, when you want, for what you want. The ISPs will decide for you. But let's examine those claims in a little more detail. Here's Boogie again.
The FCC today announced their plan to finally vote to gut net neutrality as it exists and basically change the internet as it has always been forever, and in my opinion, for the worst.
But he simply isn't correct. Net neutrality legislation is barely 2 years old. Before that, the internet really was unregulated, and ISPs were private companies able to do what they wanted. So the argument that by demolishing the legislation the FCC will be destroying the internet as it has always been is simply false. The internet developed rapidly without any form of regulation. Did that shut out the little man? Patently not, because it provided the little men like Mark Zuckerberg, who co-founded Facebook, Jack Dorsey, who co-founded Twitter, or Sean Rad, who co-founded Tinder, with the opportunity to become global businesses. And what about Pierre Omidyar, who founded eBay in 1995 and became a billionaire when it went public 3 years later? They all started as little men. There's a confusion here too. ISPs and content providers are different animals. ISPs don't make content. They simply provide access to it. Their competitors aren't specific content providers, but other ISPs. Those in favour of repeal argue that an ISP that blocks content is simply cutting its own throat. Commercially, it won't happen. Now, it seems that there's a lot of false news flying around, and one way to separate the false news from the truth is to look at who is lobbying to keep net neutrality and who is lobbying to deregulate. The Internet Association claims to be the unified voice of the Internet economy. That claim would be highly arrogant if it wasn't so patently ridiculous. Their members include some of the biggest users of bandwidth on the planet: eBay, Amazon, the giant Netflix, and many others. It's effectively a trade association lobbying on behalf of the giant businesses. It doesn't represent the small users. It's a fact that in 2015, when net neutrality was passed into legislation, Netflix bandwidth took nearly 37%, over 1/3 of the entire internet bandwidth at peak times, bigger even than YouTube, Amazon, and Hulu combined. No doubt today it's even bigger. And there's the first clue to what this argument is really about. The internet is a finite resource. Despite fibre optics and ever faster routers, there's only so much bandwidth available. That's something that people just don't seem to grasp. The internet has finite availability, not infinite availability. The more bandwidth that's taken up by the giants, the less there is for you and me.
Bandwidth is the key here. It's a finite resource. It has to be physically pushed through wires. And the more bandwidth you have going through a space, the more physical space it takes up. So at a certain point, you got to have restrictions on the amount of bandwidth going through there if you have one company or entity using a lot of it. So let's say, for example, this is where the bandwidth comes through, okay? Most of it, like let's say this much, is being taken up by Netflix. The rest, which is from here to here, is for you. How is that fair when they're taking up all of that and you get this little bit? And y'all are paying the same. Like, they need to either help as far as paying extra money, or you need to have your bandwidth reduced. It's just that simple. Or you raise your prices over at Netflix, make up the difference, because Netflix is charging too little for their service. $10 a month, and you're talking about 1/3 of all the bandwidth in the United States. Come on. Why should I have to feel like I need to subsidize Netflix with a higher per month bill on my internet?
Because of net neutrality, it's simply illegal to make Netflix, Amazon, eBay, and the other huge users pay more. But between them, they use a huge proportion of the available bandwidth. And so they're getting a great deal. And the cost goes on to your internet bill. ISPs can't charge these juggernauts more, even if they're taking up most of the available space, which in turn cramps investment in new infrastructure. Here's the man himself, Ajit Pai, chairman of the FCC, explaining his intentions.
My concern, my sole concern, is what is going to deliver a better consumer experience in the digital age. And I truly believe that removing some of these regulations that are impeding IP-based investment, getting rid of some of these antiquated regulations, is the best way to promote competition, promote consumer welfare, not these sort of over-the-top, 80-year-old regulations that have been proven not to work.
In the end, the argument comes down to which you think will provide the greatest freedom: government control of the ISP's business model, or market forces that allow ISPs to charge the big users more for their massive use of bandwidth. But for market forces to work effectively, consumers must have choice. And this is possibly the biggest issue. Let's give the last word to former chairman of the FCC, Ted Wheeler.
2/3 of the households in America have no other choice as to where they're going to get their internet. So this is, to go out and claim that somehow this is some kind of consumer protection is a fraudulent representation.
Regulation or free market? It really is a question of which is the lesser of two evils. You get your chance to make your voice heard before the vote on the 14th of December. Don't waste that chance.